Hello, and we are almost done. This is a preview video for the final book of Emily Wilson's translation of Homer's Odyssey, a book she entitles Restless Spirits. So, because it's the final book, I really don't want to say, here's all the things that happen in this book. I want to make a couple of points. I'm going to have a short presentation on just some observations regarding the end of the poem, books 21 and 24. But what I'll try to do is to offer some guidance in the reading of this particular book. Again, and you're used to hearing me say this, it's the last chapter. Make some predictions if you're reading this with a reading group or a class or even by yourself. Make predictions in your reading journal. What's left? Odysseus has unified with his own immediate family. He's destroyed the suitors who are in the way. What is there left to do? See if, before you read chapter 24, see if you can figure out what there is left to do. Okay, so what's pretty astonishing is the scope. If you did like a Google Maps of just book 24, it's pretty amazing. So what just happened in book 23 is that a whole bunch of suitors were killed. And we know from the Circe chapter that when Elpenor falls off the roof drunk, remember, don't drink and sleep on a roof. In the Hades chapter, first person we meet is Elpenor. So Homer's super aware that, when there's death, we soon meet the dead in Hades. So Hermes is bringing the dead suitors to Hades, and we find two really vital people, the two most really important until the Trojan horse, the two most important Greek characters in the Iliad, the king of the Greek fleet against the Trojans, Agamemnon, that's Odysseus' king and Achilles' king, and the greatest war machine in the Iliad, Achilles. And if you wouldn't mind, go to page 508 of your Emily Wilson translation. And I would circle page 508 and page 509. And until you get to the end of the first stanza on 510, I would just put a line. It's right around line 98. And then somewhere in the margin, this is Achilles and Agamemnon talking. Now, if you had never read the Odyssey and we had just killed off all the suitors, Odysseus reunites with Penelope, there is no way. Maybe you're smart enough as a reader to figure out that people have died, so we have to bring them to Hades. Maybe I bet you're smart enough to figure that out. But I think we're not expecting to have Agamemnon and Achilles again. It's not like Hades has 12 people in it, right? It's a crowded place. So here's an important thing just to be mindful of. Most people that read the Odyssey read it without reading the Iliad. Read the Iliad too. Agamemnon and Achilles, while they're on the same side, have a lot of conflict. Agamemnon steals Achilles' favorite girl, essentially, and who's Achilles' property. And Achilles, for a lot of the Iliad, refuses to fight, and as a result, the Greeks suffer. So Agamemnon and Achilles have a sort of love-hate relationship that's very real. So what we have here is Achilles' ghost talking to Agamemnon on page 508. We have Agamemnon's ghost really walking through Achilles' heroism, and then walking through on page 509, I just wrote in the margins, Achilles' funeral. We know how much these folks value funerals, and if you've ever planned a funeral for a loved one now, it really matters that you get the readings right and the music right, and if there's a headstone, that the caption is right and that the wake is done with class and reverence, and it still matters. It isn't just an ancient thing. So we get a lot of details, and I just want to point out on line 95, so I'm on page 510. I made a big deal in my Book 11 video of the fact that I think Book 11 is the most revolutionary chapter in all of Homer. And it's because of what Achilles' ghost says to Odysseus about how having fame in Hades, he would trade all of his fame in Hades for just being like the assistant of a slave on Earth. We've already heard Achilles say this. Agamemnon is king with good intentions, says in line 94 to Achilles, this is ghost to ghost, your fame will live forever. Everyone will know Achilles. As for me, what good was it that I wound up the war? When I came home, it's just this, and my wicked fiendish wife murdered me. So Agamemnon, that's kind of the song he sings all the time. And who can blame him, right? Agamemnon then talks to the suitors. It's just a weird, pay attention to the conversation. It's just weird. But maybe here's the question sort of underneath the conversation between Agamemnon and Achilles. Here are two men who were very much in conflict throughout the war. Why begin chapter 24 of the Odyssey with these two men speaking civilly, seemingly getting along? Agamemnon very much complimenting Achilles, particularly. Why begin book 24 with the reconciliation of two warriors from the prequel to the Odyssey? Just, I don't know, something worth thinking about. Okay, so if you go to line 106, the dead suitors summarize the Odyssey. This is their interpretation of the Odyssey, which is pretty unique in particular, to Agamemnon. Remember, Agamemnon is a ghost. He hasn't been reading the Odyssey. He's never read the Odyssey before. He knows little bits from Odysseus's visit, but he hasn't been reading the poem. So they give him, starting on line 106, their version of the story and how they died, particularly. And on the top of 513, very top of page 513, line 187, suitors say, so Agamemnon, we were killed. Our bodies still lie unburied in our killer's house. Remember, you don't have like full afterlife identity unless your body is buried. You're almost like a half ghost. So that's some information. And Agamemnon, who again has a one song sort of set list, just says, lucky you, cunning Odysseus, you got yourself a wife of virtue. My wife deceived me. He just ignores the suitors. The suitors talk for a page and a half, and Agamemnon just summarily ignors them. Now, if you guess this, congratulations. There are a couple of there's a couple of groups of people who haven't been dealt with and haven't been connected to by Odysseus. His other living relative is his father, and I'm not going to read the passage precisely, but on 514, it's really peculiar. On 514, he says that he's going to the very top, I'll test my father to find out if he'll know me instantly on sight. And I've read different things on this, and I'm not sure what I believe. It seems perverse. It seems cruel. This is an old man who lives in a poor, humble way, who hasn't seen his son for 20 years and has given up on him even being alive. But perhaps the answer is Odysseus wouldn't be Odysseus if he wasn't playing tricks. I'm not really comfortable with that answer. So I'd be curious in your comments if you have any thoughts as to why Odysseus tricks his elderly father. I just think that's really peculiar. So Odysseus, on the bottom of page 516, he's asked the typical question from Laertes, his dad, who are you? Where are you from? And it says, line 303 on page 516, lying Odysseus replied, I will tell you the truth completely. And then he lies. I'm from Alabas. I have a palace there. My name is Epiritus. And then Laertes weeps. He pours dust on his head. And on the next page in 517, Odysseus can't take it anymore. So Odysseus has a heart eventually. In the middle of page 517, line 323, says, Father, it is me. This is the last ananaresis, right? Father, it is me. I have been gone for 20 years now. I'm home in my own father's country. That's an interesting way of putting that. Odysseus is the king, my own father's country. Stop your tears. I'll explain that we don't have long. I killed the suitors in my house. I took revenge. And this must be a genetic thing in the Odysseus family, because Laertes says in the next line, 329, if you're really my own son, Odysseus, come home, show me a sign. Laertes doesn't believe him out of the gate. So that's a whole separate conversation. Why is it that when Telemachus, when Penelope, when Odysseus, and when Laertes all get good news, they're all incredulous. They don't believe every single time. So Odysseus shows him the scar and tells the story. We get what we expect. Now there's one other group. There's one other group that has to be dealt with. And I'm going to leave this up to your reading. I want you to read it and respond to it. The suitors have families. The 108 suitors that Odysseus and Telemachus have slaughtered all have families. And what the text suggests in lines 412 to 470 are some of them are Ithacans, a lot of them are Ithacans, and some live on other towns on the outskirts of Ithaca. The word has gotten to these families that their family members have been slaughtered by Odysseus, and that's a lot of people, right? So we switch gears. We can see Laertes, Telemachus, even Laertes' like slaves, Odysseus, all gearing up for another fight. We're going to kill the suitors and we're going to kill their families. So I would pay really close attention. Go to line 471 of book 24. I think this is really interesting. If you remember all the way back to book 1, the first spoken words are by Zeus. He's complaining that the mortals blame the gods for all their problems. So the very first conversation we have in the Odyssey is the 20,000 foot level Mount Olympus commenting on all human events. And we occasionally go there. So we get that in book 24. So pay attention. I said Google Maps book 24. We're in Hades, we're on Earth, and we're in Mount Olympus. It's almost like book 24 is its own little mini epic poem. Athena says to Zeus, line 472, Father Zeus, highest of powers, tell what hidden thoughts lie in you. Will you now make yet more war and bitter strife, or join the sides in friendship? And then Zeus says, my child, why ask me this? The plan was your idea. It seems like even the gods are constantly blaming each other. To have Odysseus come take revenge, do as you wish. I'm not sure if telling Athena that is a good idea. But then Zeus says, here's my advice. Odysseus has already punished all the suitors, so let them, meaning their families, the suitors' families, swear an oath that Odysseus will be king forever. Pronouns get dicey here. So make the suitors' family you want to fight now, just make them promise that they're going to honor Odysseus to be the king forever. And let's make sure, Zeus says, that the murder of their brothers and their sons will be forgotten, so that the families of the suitors will forget what happened. I don't know how that looks. I don't know how that happens. Let them all be friends. Usually something happens between murder and friendship, I think. But anyway, Zeus seems to have a very clear idea on this. Let them live in peace and prosperity. So the poem ends. And I'm not going to say what happens. I want you to read the last few pages on your own. You've read this entire thing. You're used to its patterns. You're even used to its surprises. What does the end of the poem do to our thoughts of the poem's greater messages? Maybe put it more simply, why do you think the poem ends this way? And I think it's great to talk about, if you have problems with the end of this poem, discuss them and write about them. If you think it's surprising and interesting and, a good ending, it's good to talk about it and write about it. I hope these videos have been helpful. I have a few more to come. I'm going to have a books 21 to 24 deep dive along with a video that sort of describes the best books I've read about Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I hope this is helpful, and good luck with your reading.